let's try to set Wisconsin aside for a second and try to examine what tomorrow means in terms of the overall race.
Well, Wisconsin's important, I think, because it suddenly focuses people on the numbers, not just on brand, not just on momentum, but does Donald Trump actually have the numbers to get to 1,237 delegates, which is a majority, what he needs to clinch the nomination? And it looks like he's going to have a tough fight getting there. So if he doesn't win enough in Wisconsin, suddenly real doubts are raised about whether he'll win at all, which is a good thing for the Republican establishment. But the conversation then turns to what kind of a convention are they going to have? Is it going to be an open convention? And that starts to raise questions among many American politicians, in fact, who don't really understand how delegated conventions work. Fortunately, we Canadians do. We have them all the time. And it's made me think of one of them in particular. In 1983 in Ottawa, Joe Clark lost the leadership of the Conservative Party then, which you remember well. What I remember about that campaign, though, was that it became a referendum on Joe Clark's leadership, in the same way that this Republican campaign has become a referendum on Donald Trump for the nomination. And the important thing is that Clark went into that campaign with everyone knowing that if he didn't win it on the first ballot, he wasn't going to have any growth. He wasn't going to be able to hang on to the leadership. The same is true with Trump. That is the strategy of the Republican establishment now, to hold him to below 1,237, believing that if he doesn't win it on the first ballot then in Cleveland, then he's not going to win it at all.
Well, you know, to not get to 1237, something's got to happen to seriously slow his momentum. For the last year, you know, we've watched these various moves by him, the apparent boneheaded statements he's made that haven't cost him at all. Last week he had a bad week, so says everybody. Tomorrow we'll find out just how bad it was. What does that say about the situation in terms of Trump?
Well, first of all, I think the interesting thing about it is that Megyn Kelly, the Fox News anchor, pointed out what the problem was when the campaign began with the first debate last August. She asked Trump about his reputation with women for saying things that were rude, inconsiderate, insulting, and sexist. And she said, isn't this going to be a problem for you if the Democrats can use that to say the Republican Party is at war with women? And that didn't get as much attention as it probably should, partly because people were focused solely on the Republican race and how well Donald Trump was doing against other Republican candidates. Since we have got this late into the campaign, people have naturally focused on how well he would do in a general election. And guess what? Doesn't look like he'd do that well. That evidence was always there, but people, I think, are paying much more attention to it now. And what they are seeing is what Megyn Kelly warned them they would see, a huge gender gap with women. 70+% of women have a negative attitude towards, or a negative, give Trump a negative approval rating in the country. 52% of women are voters. Not only that, women are more likely to vote than men. That's a terrible thing for Republicans, and they're starting to realize not only might they lose the White House because of that, but it might have what they call a down ballot effect, which would put into play Senate seats, seats in the House of Representatives. And all of that in a year when the presidency has become vitally important, as has the Senate, because of the Supreme Court of all things. The next president might appoint the next 4 Supreme Court justices, something that hasn't happened since Richard Nixon was in the White House. And we know that lately the Supreme Court has been a tremendous influence in shaping the society and the political life of the country. That can be expected to continue. And if it's a Democrat in the White House, Republicans aren't going to have as much say as they've been used to having for the last 4 decades about who sits on the Supreme Court.
Well, it's going to be interesting tomorrow. It's going to be interesting for the next few months. Keith, thanks very much.
Thank you, Peter.